And we're back. This is Hook and Ladder. We are in week 6. We missed week 5 because we were in Mexico City. We were on hiatus doing the Metallica thing.
Yep. See Metallica in Mexico City, bucket list.
Yeah.
A city to see the band.
That's right.
Awesome time. Didn't watch any football at all. They're not huge fans of college football down in Mexico.
Not.
Who would have thought?
That's right.
Asking them to put the game on, like, oh yeah, we have Sky Sports, and then you put it on like the entire day. 24/7 is different soccer leagues from around the world.
Oddly enough, they had the A&M game playing.
Yeah, we watched a few minutes of the Michigan game on your phone. Followed along on my phone. The scores and saw some highlights on Twitter, but didn't actually get to see live football really. So that's why we didn't have a video last week. We were coming back.
Well, this time last week we were still in Mexico City.
Yeah,
ready for the show.
I brought a little something back with me that lasted for a few days. It is what it is, but we're back. Glad to be back in America.
You are looking kind of lean today.
Yeah, I swear I lost like 10 pounds. Glad to be back in America watching college football. I spent all night Friday night and basically all day and night yesterday watching, trying to make up for lost time, and I had a hell of a time watching games. It was great games yesterday.
That's right. Well, I guess we're going to get started. Friday night, Oregon knocked off Michigan State 31-10.
I watched this game. Oregon, I watched them a handful of times this season, and while they're winning games, they don't look as dominant as they did the last couple of seasons. And, you can't sustain that type of success, indefinitely. Guys go to the NFL, guys transfer, graduate. You got to bring in new guys. Dylan Gabriel, this is his 3rd team. I think this is his 4th or 5th different offensive coordinator in his career. Spent, I think, 3 years at UCF. Then went to Oklahoma, and now he's at Oregon. He doesn't look bad by any stretch of the imagination. He looks pretty good, not elite yet. But they don't look like they're clicking on all cylinders, in my opinion. Michigan State's not a good football team. And when I was watching this game, I was kind of feeling nostalgic for the days that that 1 year Mel Tucker had Michigan State, kind of back on top of the mountain, almost in the Big Ten. But Oregon's looking better in the Big Ten than pretty much any of the other, Pac-12 bringovers. But they don't look as crisp as I would have thought they would at this point. But you never know. There's a lot of football left. I predicted the Oregon-Ohio State game to be a close game, and now I don't really think it's going to be. But I'm glad to finally be able to watch basically a full game of Oregon.
Right. Moving right along, Syracuse knocked off UNLV 44-41. You were saying earlier Kyle McCord wasn't the problem?
No, and I've said this multiple times during the season so far. I don't think Kyle McCord was the problem at Ohio State. Kid threw for 355, a couple of touchdowns. He's been throwing the football very, very well. Brought him back from being down to UNLV. This is a ranked opponent, UNLV, they're playing. Brought him from being down a couple of times, brought him back. Fran Brown's got Syracuse playing well. There's a bunch of transfers he brought in, and those guys are paying dividends. There's a couple of guys that he brought with him from Georgia, and one of the guys is a wide receiver, Jackson Meeks, who's having a great season so far for him. But I don't think he was the problem at Ohio State. And I was talking to Chris Conley, member of our group, and we were discussing it yesterday about, he was basically the scapegoat. He wasn't, an alpha male. He was a little bit timid, I guess, and he wanted assurances after the season. And this is according to Ohio State people, so we're not really sure if it's actually true. But he wanted assurances that he was going to be the starter, and they wouldn't give it to him. But I don't think he was the issue last year. I think the issue with Ohio State was the coach and the culture that Ryan Day has at Ohio State. I don't think it was the players. No. And he's proved it this year. They're playing great. Will Howard's playing good for Ohio State. Yep. But we'll see what happens when they play a really good team.
That's right. Moving into what everybody was thinking to be like a ho-hum Saturday. And
turned out really damn good.
That's right. The big game of the week, Vanderbilt knocks off BAMA 40-35. Vanderbilt jumped out of a big lead.
They did, and I don't care what SEC Today or whatever it was called, the highlight show, they tried to downplay the significance of Vanderbilt beating Alabama, saying how great Vanderbilt is. Vanderbilt's 2-2. Yes, they played phenomenal. That's probably the best Vanderbilt has played in the last 40 years. The offensive game plan was good. I watched most of this game. Great game plan was great offensively. Pavia, awesome QB. He's not going to wow you with any one thing he does. He just does everything really good. Right. And he's a very tough-nosed football player. They took it to Alabama. They out-physicaled Alabama, in my opinion.
The time of possession was like 40-20.
Yes. I mean, Alabama's a quick, straight team. Mm-hmm. Just throw the ball up to Ryan Williams. All right? It's a touchdown every time. Alabama doesn't have... And if you look at the Georgia game last week, the box scores, a lot of guys caught passes. They don't have the elite guy to be the number 2. They've got the one dude, and he was the dude yesterday as well. Jalen Milroe played well. He had the fumble. Not really his fault. He got drilled, fumbled the football. But Vanderbilt played really, really good. Like I said, that's the best they've played in 40 years. I mean, but they're a 2-2 team. Let's not sit there and say that they're a top 10 team that Alabama lost to. This is an unranked team on the road. We'll give them credit.
That's right.
SEC's not easy.
That's right.
All right? Going on the road in the SEC, as we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, isn't an easy thing, even when you play an unranked team.
Yeah. I heard the goalpost was dragged down Broadway.
Got down Broadway and thrown in the Columbia River, which I think is great. Eventually, someone's going to fish that out, and it's going to be worth a lot of money. Yeah. But there's still the significance, dude. It's Vanderbilt. They've been a bottom feeder in the SEC for decades, and you lost to them.
Yeah.
This isn't like, getting bit by Mississippi State or South Carolina or even Kentucky. Yeah. You got bit by Vanderbilt,
that's right.
And you looked pretty bad doing it.
Yeah. Well,
defensively.
Back-to-back weeks, you blow a big lead against Georgia, almost lose that game, and then you take it to you go to Nashville to play Vanderbilt, and you get embarrassed.
You're giving up over 30 points a game two weeks in a row. After being up on Georgia 30-7 at the half, 5 turnovers by Carson Beck, and you still could have lost that game.
That's right.
This is not the Alabama defense that we've all come to know for the last 15 years. They don't go back-to-back games giving up over 30.
That's right. Saban's not there anymore.
No, he's not. I mean, I'm not panicking. If you're an Alabama fan, don't panic either. There's still, they got a 72% chance of making the playoffs, 79% chance of making the playoffs. They don't really have to play anybody else other than, I think, LSU, and then they play Oklahoma. That should be, you should say anything's easy. You lost to Vanderbilt. But
you don't know.
Exactly, you don't know. And as we'll get to in just a minute, you never know when you play in the SEC.
That's right. Ohio State knocked off Iowa 35-7. You watch much of this one?
I watched a little bit. I saw Jeremiah Smith make a ridiculous one-handed grab. Mm-hmm. That guy is great. I feel bad for him, and I don't feel bad for the Ohio State fans. They're going to cry if you bring it up. But Ryan Williams is the dude in college football. He's like 1A. Jeremiah Smith's probably 1B, and it's not. I feel bad for him because the dude's having a huge season, but everyone's talking about Ryan Williams, Ryan Williams that. Jeremiah Smith has been making plays since the first freaking snap of the damn season for these guys. They're looking good. Will Howard, a ho-hum day, 200-plus yards passing, nothing great, but they're just solid football team. Defensively, they look good. They played Iowa. We all know what Iowa's capable of offensively, which isn't much of anything, so I never really thought this game was in jeopardy. They don't really play too many decent teams. I read an article this week predicting the first loss for undefeated teams, and when it came to basically everybody was giving them an in-season possible loss. Didn't do that for Ohio State. It said playoffs. That's when they possibly would lose their first game. We've said it before, and this is nothing against Ohio State. Like, I'm not trying to dog on Ohio State. I'm not a fan. I don't like them. I kind of like it when they lose. It's fun. But they have a garbage schedule. They always have. Yeah. Michigan has been good the last few years. Michigan's crap this year. Yeah. But it's not their fault. They play the schedule they're dealt. You can't help the fact that other teams in the conference are hot garbage. Right. All right, Nebraska's trying to do something. That's pretty much it, really. But they don't have to play Nebraska. Penn State's good, but Penn State pussied out and didn't want to have Ohio State in the schedule. So they're like, let's not choose them, and how they did that last year, the year before, with the new schedule this season. So they'll probably maybe play somebody that they're leaps and bounds better than in the conference championship. Yeah. But I don't see anybody in the conference touching them right now. I think some teams could give them a problem, but I don't see really anybody beating them. Yeah.
Well, how about Arkansas knocking off Tennessee 19-14?
Then that was a boring game. I watched that game, and I just kept waiting for Tennessee to just open it up, and they wouldn't. I mean, Arkansas's defense played pretty good, but I thought Tennessee's offense played bad. Yeah. Arkansas's running game is good. A team that was struggling to score a bunch of points and and beat decent teams I didn't see them having the offensive output to beat Tennessee. Tennessee's defense is really, really good. Those two running backs they have, it's like trying to tackle a defensive end. They're huge. And those guys played well. The quarterback went down. The backup came in and ran for the game-winning touchdown. I got to give Sam Pittman credit. He had those guys ready to play. They're more physical than they have been the last couple of years. I don't want to say they're more talented because they had KJ Jefferson, who I think is just a bad quarterback. But they had Rocket Sanders, who's now at South Carolina. They had some good skill guys who've since gone elsewhere. I think the quarterback, I watched him against Auburn last week, or was a week before. He played okay. He could run the football with his, good with his legs. He could throw the ball a little bit. He went out. Backup came in. The backup looked better, in my opinion. But I was really shocked at this. Really happy for Arkansas fans. Julie, in particular, she seemed extremely excited for this win. Huge loss for Tennessee. I mean, 4 in the country. Their playoff chances now, I saw this morning, have dipped below 50% to make them. And that's not good because I thought Tennessee could just keep getting better as we go along in the weeks. Nico keep looking better. He looked bad yesterday. Their wide receiver core is banged up. I kind of thought they could make a run. We'll see. They very well may. It's one loss, but it's a disappointing loss. Just like we talked about with the Alabama Vanderbilt. Ole Miss losing to Kentucky last week. The SEC, because of the transfer portal and NIL, is harder this year than it's been. You can see that in the Big Ten, and you can see it in the Big 12 as well. No. But I think at the SEC level, it's more pronounced. There's more money being thrown at some of these kids to transfer, and I think it's making some teams better a lot faster than they should be. And if they're not just better overall, they've got enough talent on these teams to do a one-off like we saw yesterday.
We'll move right along. Georgia knocked off Auburn 31-13. Georgia got off a slow start, but ended up making it look
scored a touchdown the first possession. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I felt they had more opportunities. I thought Mike Bobo called a bad game in the first half. He keeps wanting to throw the wide receiver screen. It's just not working. Hasn't worked all year for Georgia. If you throw it on the near side of the field, there's not really enough room for the wide receiver to really get away. When they throw it to the far side of the field, it's too far for the lineman to come out. And I think what's happening is the offensive line play for Georgia especially is down this year. I personally believe that's Georgia's biggest issue is the offensive line play. Defensively, they're kind of the same Georgia we've always known, but like I said earlier with Oregon, you got a lot of guys graduating, going on to the NFL. They're not going to, they're still going to be a solid unit, but they're not as good as the last couple of years.
It's one of the Georgia's strengths is the linebackers in the secondary.
Yes, and there's just a lot of turnover. Linebackers are extremely young. The defensive line is good, but the depth is an issue with a lot of guys injured. But Carson Beck looked better. He only threw maybe 2 or 3 bad passes that I saw. Still like to see him be a little bit better, but threw for 240 and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, which is good. ETN looked good running the football. Frazier looked good running the football. It's the Deep South's oldest rivalry, which I found out the very first time they played. It was the 129th game. The first game wasn't even during what we call football season. It was during February. They played in Atlanta. But, Auburn always comes to play in this game. That first half, when it ended up being 14-10, and they go to the half, and then Georgia comes out second half and just kind of runs roughshod through them for the most part. But got to give Auburn credit. They didn't turn the football over at all. They played pretty good. Georgia just kind of, took over the game. I'd say like second half, and Georgia looked pretty good. You keep looking up, and you're like, Auburn's moving the football, and then you look, you're like, man, Georgia's only given up 13 points in this game. A touchdown and 2 field goals. They blocked the field goal too. So you wanted to see that as a Georgia fan. Jackson. Yeah, right. You wanted to see that as a Georgia fan. You wanted to see them kind of get up off the mat after that bad game against Alabama and see how they would respond.
They beat a rival.
They did. They beat a rival. It's a big game, conference game, but I still have that lingering feeling that it's not even a lingering feeling. To me, it's fact. Georgia's not as good as we thought they were. And to me, as I mentioned earlier, it's the offensive line play that stands out to me. They can't outman you offensively in the run game. They'll pass protect Beck okay. He's going to get sacked a time or 2 a game. But there's enough time for him to make plays down the field. But the run blocking, to me, is bad.
Moving right along, Penn State knocked up UCLA 27-11. You see any of this one?
I watched this game as well. Drew Allen looked okay. They didn't look super good. This game was basically in hand the entire time. I thought they had outclassed UCLA. Another one of the Big Ten additions from out west that doesn't look good. Yeah. They didn't have to look. Penn State didn't have to look great. Willing to see what they can do against a good team. I just keep thinking back. What are they going to look like if they play Ohio State? And they had a good graph with James Franklin's record,
right?
And then his record when they have to play Michigan or Ohio State, and it's like that's who he is. They're a 9 to 10 win team. I don't see this team beating, the other top two teams in the Big Ten. I know a lot of people have them in the playoffs. They're ranked number 7. I think they're in for a rude awakening when they finally play decent teams.
Yeah, I agree. Moving right along, Miami knocked off Cal 39-38. I fell asleep during this one.
I did too. Second week in a row, though, Cal has gotten bailed. It's not Cal. Miami has gotten bailed out. Should have been targeting last night. That dude led with the freaking head. Looked like his arms were by his side. Like he was launched like a missile. Textbook targeting. I don't know why anyone was trying to cover for Miami. I get the fact that, college football is better when Miami is good. Yeah. With all the scandals, though, I don't see why people would want them in there anyway. They're number 8. They're destined to lose here. Cam Ward looked good. He turns the ball over every now and again, but he's just so talented running and passing that usually they can overcome it. They haven't played any really good teams yet. I'm interested to see what happens when they've got to play Clemson and teams like Louisville and, just more conference teams that are better than Cal. I don't know if they're going to lose in the regular season. But I don't see them really making any hay.
Right.
In a national championship type of race.
We'll see. They get hot later in the season. You never know what's going to happen. Okay, Texas A&M. Where'd they come from? They knocked off Missouri 41-10.
Connor Wegman looked like the guy that everybody thought he would be when they recruited him. The holdovers from Jimbo Fisher's NIL extravaganza, NIL spending extravaganza. Right. Spending spree are playing well. They're finally playing like the Texas A&M. Everybody kind of thought they were gonna be like the last couple of years. They put a whoop ass on Missouri. Number 9 Missouri was a good, solid football team. Missouri just kept shooting themselves in the foot though with penalties. Luther Burden had a really nice long touchdown reception. They called it back for a penalty. A lot of penalties in this game. They just couldn't get out from behind that. They got down too quickly, and they couldn't make up the difference because they kept shooting themselves in the foot. But got to give A&M credit. The defense looks good.
Yep, I agree.
Could this finally be the A&M this year and into next year that everyone's been waiting on? We'll see.
Their schedule's looking favorable, and they got Texas in the season. Could be interesting. Could be very interesting. Moving right along, Will Rogers in Washington knocks off Michigan 27-17. A name I hadn't heard in a while.
Yeah, Will Rogers of the Mississippi State fame, guy's a prolific passer, goes to Washington to be with Kalen DeBoer, the QB guru. DeBoer bails, goes to Alabama. Will Rogers sticks it out. He looked good. 271 yards passing, looked really good. Michigan looked decent running the football at times. They just... they can't throw. And the kid comes in, number 13. I thought he looked okay throwing the football. He let it down for a touchdown drive. They started turning it over. And you just can't have that. You can't turn the ball over on the road like that and expect to win with a young, inexperienced QB, which actually I don't think he's young. I just think he's inexperienced. I think he was like a fourth-year guy in the program. Maybe. I could be wrong. Number 13, they benched Orgy, and they brought in this kid, 13. Like I said, other than turnovers, I thought he played pretty good. He was be able to complete a downfield pass. But Washington took it to him, and you got to kind of think, Michigan, the last 3 years of them being really, really good, just like we talked about with Oregon and some of the other teams, a lot of guys have gone on to the pros, and they've just got to reload and get those kids up to speed. I think next year they'll be fine.
That's right. Now, moving right along, Minnesota knocked off USC 24-17.
I thought USC was going to win this game, and they just like the Tennessee-Arkansas, they just wouldn't
take over.
Yeah, they had some plays, there was some opportunities, they just wouldn't do it. Miller Moss didn't have a very good game, threw for 200. Minnesota's run game, that running back looked really good, running the football, catching passes out of the backfield. Got to give it to PJ Fleck. think people kind of wrote them off.
Yeah,
but they look good. They look pretty good. They were down huge last week to Michigan and came back and made it interesting. This is a big win for them. And USC, number 11 in the country, has got 2 losses in conference.
Yeah. As
improved as they are, I still believe they are a much improved football team. You lost Bear Alexander because he wanted money, and he decided to redshirt and go somewhere else to get more money. Bitch move by him. We are seeing that a lot. There's like 5 or 6 guys so far have done that. I think it's bitch moves by those guys.
That UNLV quarterback, which may be hurting their program.
There's been there was like 5 of them yesterday alone that I saw the tweets.
Yeah.
But USC physically, like I said, they're better. They're a better football team, and they're not as soft as they were, but they're still not ready, in my opinion, physically to compete in the Big Ten. I'm watching them kind of slog their way through these conference games against teams that offensively they're just so much better than, and this is what's happening. Yeah. And I truly believe it's the physical aspect. These Big Ten teams are just more physical than Pac-12 teams are, and they haven't adjusted yet. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. Yeah. They might need another recruiting class or 2 to get there. Yeah.
Moving right along, Ole Miss knocked off South Carolina 27-3. Ole Miss trying to get right after upset last week.
That upset, losing to Kentucky at home. This was one of the games that kind of was a casualty for me. I didn't get to watch this game. I kind of chose to watch some other games, but I was checking out the highlights. Jackson Dart looked good. Really surprised that South Carolina really couldn't do anything. They had their QB coming back. They had Sellers running the football. Rocket Sanders. Their defense is good. They got 2 really good bookend defensive ends. I don't really know what to make of South Carolina because they beat Kentucky, who we now know is a good football team. Yeah. They played LSU really tough. Should have won that game. Played great offensively. Just defensively, LSU's a passing machine.
Yeah.
I never expected South Carolina to be good, but they proved to be better than I thought they were going to be. I just didn't expect them to lay an egg in this game like they did. And it was at home.
Yeah. Go figure. Ole Miss is supposed to be really good. South Carolina has been up and down all season long. It kind of works out that way. Clemson knocked off Florida State 29-13, kind of what you expected. Florida State's in that just worst season in a long time.
Yeah, DJ, I think, has got like a broken finger and he's out for a few weeks. Probably good. Yeah. This at least gives you a chance to see what you have behind him and see if maybe going forward you feel comfortable that you don't need to take a transfer portal QB. I honestly believe Florida State, this is good. This is the biggest game on their schedule. Now, after what we've seen from them this year, their season's over. This is a get guys ready to go for next year type of rest of the way. And you can disagree with me if you want on that. That's the way I feel. Your season's done. You're not playing for anything other than pride right now. And I say put some guys in, make some calls, see what you got ready for next year, see what holes you need to address in the portal and in the recruiting class. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what they got. But I thought this is their biggest game. I thought they'd give them a little bit more run than they did, 29-13. I don't think the game was as close as that score indicates. Right. I watched a good bit of this game. Klubnik looked pretty good. Didn't throw for a ton. Didn't need to. Phil Mufafa, the big giant guy, ran for $150. Yeah. He's a really good running back when he can go straight north and south. He's not super dynamic. Yep. But when they block for him, he can get a full head of steam and get into this defensive secondary pretty easily. Clemson's looking good after being completely shut down by Georgia in week 1. I still don't know what they're about because they haven't played too many good teams other than Georgia. But look, in the conference they're in, it's fairly easy. They're probably going to go up against Miami in the conference championship. That's right. They do have to play Louisville. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there.
See what happens.
Louisville lost yesterday, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah. Moving right along, Iowa State knocked off Baylor 43-21. Iowa State's having a quietly good season.
They are, and this was another casualty like the Ole Miss game. I didn't get to watch this. I was watching 4 games last night, and this is the one at the very bottom of the screen I just wouldn't go down to. Yeah. I expected Iowa State to take this game just because Baylor offensively, they got a lot of issues. Yeah. I haven't watched Iowa State this year, but I knew they were a sneaky good team, so hopefully next week I get to check them out.
That's right. Moving right along, Boise State knocked off Utah State 62-30.
Ashton Jeanty runs for over 100 again. Dude's got to be, in my opinion,
in the discussion.
He's in the discussion for the Heisman. I'd say he's the front runner. The graph I saw earlier this week, it was Travis Hunter and then him. Jalen Milroe's there. Cam Ward's there. It's going to be a QB. Milroe lost yesterday. Mm-hmm. So you got Cam Ward. You got Shedeur Sanders. You got Travis Hunter. I still think it's this guy's pure stats alone. This is what they're 5 games into the season. He's already over 1,000 yards.
Yeah, he's total domination.
Yeah, I mean, like, this guy's got to be your front runner. I didn't really watch any of this game. I saw some of the highlights on Twitter, and he just went kind of did janty things, you know.
Just looking awesome. SMU knocked off Louisville 34-27.
I watched this game, pulling for Louisville because I would like to see the ACC have some tough matchups, some good teams, and they just kind of really couldn't get it together. It was always like they'd be down 10 and score 3. They'd be down, 13 and score 7. It just wasn't like they just couldn't, they'd make a score and then they couldn't stop them.
Right. Moving right along. Indiana, the undefeated Indiana Hoosiers, by the way, 41-24 over Northwestern.
Didn't see any of this game. Yeah. Didn't see any highlights either, and it's probably because they were playing Northwestern.
That's right. Moving right along, Wisconsin.
I did see the Indiana handle on Twitter, kind of posting scores and stuff like that. That's it.
Yeah. Wisconsin knocked off Purdue 52-6.
I thought Purdue would be doing more this year. They got a lot of transfers from some big-time programs. Yeah. I thought those guys would come in and pay dividends. You start looking at some of the guys that transfer, like guys coming out of Alabama and places like that, in Georgia with the Syracuse reference earlier. These guys are not getting any playing time at these schools, and then they're going to a different school, and they're becoming one of the best players on the field.
Right.
I expected a little bit more from Purdue.
Yeah. I guess we'll move on to next weekend's games. There's a couple of undefeated teams still left floating around that are not ranked, like Pitt. But I'm curious to see where we're at in a week or two, see how all this stuff shakes out. Moving right along, we got a Wednesday. Ooh, we got a Tuesday night game.
Tuesday night game. Got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Nothing really that jumps off the page at you. A lot of group of 5 teams playing.
You got Friday night. You got
Friday night. Starts some of the good stuff.
Oh, Utah. We got Arizona State.
A couple of ranked teams play late Friday. Got UNLV at Utah State. Utah at Arizona State. That'll be a tough game.
Yeah. Moving right along. We got Bama trying to get right against South Carolina at noon on ABC.
We'll see which South Carolina shows up. We'll see if Alabama's defense can play a little bit better than they have. I don't really think South Carolina's passing offense is that great, and that's kind of for the most part, where Alabama's struggles lie. I'm wondering if the bookend DEs for South Carolina can get after Milroe.
Yeah. And at 3:30, we got Texas, Oklahoma, the Cotton Bowl.
That'd be a damn good game. I think Oklahoma's defense is good. Their offense isn't. Texas is probably the most complete team in the country right now. Mm-hmm. I feel they should, after Alabama losing, these guys will obviously jump back up to number 1 like they were a few weeks ago after beating Michigan. Although that win is not looking as good, but still pretty damn impressive to go to the big house and win. They're the most complete team in my opinion.
Yeah. We got a pretty good matchup. Penn State taking on USC. It was
at Southern California. This would be a game I'm very interested to watch to see how Penn State does against that offense. Mm-hmm. I still think Penn State can be able to move the football on them, but we'll see what happens. That'd be probably the game I'm watching.
That's right.
Because I think Texas, Oklahoma will probably be a lot more difficult than people think it's going to be. It was a rivalry game. But the intriguing matchup to me is that Penn State USC. I want to see if Penn State can do enough to look like they belong in the conference championship matchup.
I agree. Georgia's got Mississippi State at 4:15.
Mm-hmm. Florida at Tennessee. That's going to be a game. I still think Tennessee is going to roll them pretty damn bad, but that's a rivalry game. You never know. I thought the same thing last year, and Tennessee went into Florida and laid an egg.
Yep. Big game. Ohio State against Oregon at 7:30. This is going to be out there in Oregon. This could be
It's in Oregon. I think that's going to be a very difficult matchup. Yep. I still expect Ohio State to win. I haven't really seen enough from Oregon to think that they compete with the juggernaut Buckeyes. But, that's why they play the game. We've seen way too many weird shit happening so far this season.
Yeah. Moving right along, you got Ole Miss taking on LSU at 7:30.
Dude, take the over on this game. Neither team's playing great defense. Well, I should say Ole Miss. Ole Miss's defense is playing pretty damn good. But I'm saying take the damn over on this. There's going to be some points in that game.
So Vanderbilt's got going to Kentucky at 7:45 Saturday.
That'd be a tough game for both teams.
That's right.
Kansas State at Colorado. Colorado
10-15.
Colorado gets the win. They're probably going to be ranked.
Yep.
Boise State at Hawaii at 11 p.m. I probably will watch maybe the first half of that game before I fall asleep on the couch.
That's right.
I like watching Boise State. I like watching Gianti.
They're always
run the
exciting.
football. Yeah, I mean, he's just fun watching them run.
That's right. Well, that concludes this week's matchups and preview for next week. So I guess we'll see you guys next Sunday.
Yeah, next week should have some good games. We didn't think this week was going to be all that great. It turned out to be awesome.
That's right.
Next week probably should be even better.
Yep, never doubt it. You guys have a good week.